You'd go into your pit of depression. When that happened, I often felt abandoned.
So maybe alone?
Yeah, alone, abandoned. I was just kind of left to deal with stuff. And that was a really painful feeling that led me to start thinking that either I did something wrong or that there was something wrong with me inherently. I felt like the situation was out of my control, which is a painful place for me to be. So I'd lose my objectivity because these painful emotions pretty much took over. I've been abandoned. I've done something wrong. Things are out of my control. And that skewed my sense of responsibility. I thought that I had to take responsibility for all that, and it was my job to fix everything. And I'd do that by attempting to take control any way I could. But in reality, I was actually being controlled by your depression. Your depression was telling me I wasn't okay.
Right.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your step family from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of step family life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Well, hey there. Thank you so much for joining us today. We want to welcome you to the show as always. And you know what? We know that you're busy. We know that you have lots of things to do throughout your week. And it's not lost on us that you choose to spend this time each week with us. And we're so grateful for that. And, you know, I want to commend you for spending some intentional time learning about blended family dynamics so that you can just continue to grow in your relationships. And two, I'm just grateful for your trust in us. We work really hard at bringing quality content that is helpful and actionable. And we hope to kind of challenge you, but also bring hope at the same time. And so I just want to thank you for joining us in this time. And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or I guess they call it follow now, right? I guess I'm old school. It's not subscribe anymore. It's follow. If you haven't followed us, I want to encourage you to do that because every other week we drop a simple step. It's a really short, simple episode. We don't put it on our website. We don't email you about it. Nothing. It only drops in the podcast apps. And if you're not following, you might miss it. And so I just want to encourage you to follow on whatever platform, whatever app you tend to listen through. Because investing in your blended family is really about investing in your relationships. And human relationships are complex. And let's face it, it's a reality that they're sometimes challenging, right?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I recently came across this quote. Relationships don't last because of the good times. They last because the hard times were handled with love and care. And I love that quote because it faces the reality of the hard times that will come to all of us. And it illuminates the truth that when handled well, the hard times are actually one of the things that can make a relationship last. We won't have the capacity to go the distance if we aren't able to work through the hardships in healthy ways.
Totally. And you know, the hard times can make us stronger and they create deep intimacy and connection that we wouldn't have experienced if everything was just smooth sailing all the time, right? So even though most of us don't enjoy the hard times, or at least I don't, maybe you do, I don't know. And really often we might even try to avoid difficulties. But the truth is that we will experience some challenges no matter what we do and some painful realities in all of our relationships, not just as a couple, but with our kids and with our stepkids, sometimes with our in-laws, and of course with some ex-spouses. That can be challenging. Kudos to those of you who have that going really well, but for many of us, it's challenging. You know, honestly, everyone in our big old blended family forest can face some challenges.
Yeah, we've heard it said that those of us living in blended family dynamics don't have a family tree. We've got an entire forest.
That's right.
There are so many relational connections that we have to learn how to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really shouldn't be surprised when we experience relational tension along the way.
That's right.
And it doesn't seem to matter if your blended forest is relatively small, like maybe just one of you brought a child into your relationship, and you're what we would call a simple step family dealing with just one ex-spouse, or if your family forest is big and complicated with multiple sets of kids and multiple exes to contend with. Whatever the dynamic, simple or complex, there will be relational tension and challenges.
That's right. So today we want to tackle an aspect of relational tension and struggle that can sometimes pop up, and it might manifest in some different ways. Some may call this particular struggle by a few different names, such as people-pleasing or peacekeeping.
Some might call it enabling or avoiding.
And if we kind of flip to the other side of the coin of what we're talking about today, some people might refer to this as being controlling or fixing or caretaking or rescuing.
That's right. But the term that encapsulates much of this is codependency. Now, this is an important topic because when hard things happen in our relationships and we struggle with tough emotions and realities that we hadn't anticipated, it's easy to fall into codependency traps. And when we do, it can create even more challenges and relational tension.
Absolutely. Now, we're not counselors or therapists. We are relationship coaches. So we're not qualified to do a deep dive here, but we've got some personal experience that we're going to share about and maybe just going to get you started thinking about how codependency might be impacting you. And codependency can be tricky because sometimes it feels like we're doing something helpful in the midst of difficulty when we kind of slide into what we call a codependency trap. We're actually, in the end, we're not helping at all. So let me give you an example of how this kind of plays out in our marriage or how it has played out over the years. You know, Kim came into our marriage with a history of depression. She was battling that for a while. And this is something that she'd been dealing with some of the symptoms of depression on and off for probably several years, right before we got together.
Yeah. And I'll add that one of the ways I coped when I was feeling down was to spend time in what we've come to call my pity pit. And this was something I learned from my mom, who would spend long periods of time locked in a room when conflict or tension was impacting her emotionally. And I think this was her way of kind of escaping the pain.
Yeah, that's how she coped.
Yeah. And so I adopted this unhealthy coping mechanism, and I would end up spending quite a bit of time in my pity pit to escape problems. I'd kind of just opt out of life for a while. I would isolate and just feel sorry for myself because things weren't working out the way I thought they should.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, for several years, when Kim would go into her pity pit and isolate herself from me and from the family, I had this persistent sense that I was responsible for making her feel better and to get her out of her pit. And I really believed that I could fix it for you, honey. Or sometimes even I felt like I had to fix you. Would you say that that's pretty accurate?
Yeah. And to do that, you'd kind of feel obligated to climb down into the pit with me. And then you'd end up opting out of life for a while too, even though you weren't depressed.
Right.
In your attempts to try and make me feel better. Now, when you did that, I did feel comforted in the moment because misery loves company.
Of course.
But you really didn't have the capacity to get me out of my pit, and it wasn't your job to do.
Exactly. And, you know, that was actually a really hard thing for me to accept. See, I tend to be a fixer, so I wanted to make things better, but I ended up doing just the opposite. By spending time in the pit, basically pitying you and then trying to drag you out of your funk, I was doing two dysfunctional things. First, I was actually keeping you stuck. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but I'm not a clinical psychologist who's trained to treat depression, right? I didn't have the knowledge or the skills to truly help you in the way that you needed to be helped.
Right.
So by excessively extending sympathy and believing that I could just fix your depression and pull you out of it, I was simply placating your need to feel what you were feeling. Like you needed to sit in it for a little while and decide you were going to get yourself out. And the second dysfunctional thing was actually all about me. I was holding on to this belief that in order for me to be okay, you had to also be okay. If I couldn't figure out how to make you okay, then I just couldn't be okay. I was sacrificing my own well-being, thinking that I was doing something loving and helping you, but that wasn't the case at all. In reality, I'd fallen into a codependency trap, and I wasn't helping you or our family.
Okay, so that's just one example that we've lived out between us in our marital relationship. But let's give another example of how codependency can play out in parent-child relationships. And again, remember, codependency has two sides. Some of us will avoid or excuse problems. Others will become overly focused on controlling or fixing problems. And we often see these two sides coming out in parenting.
That's right. You know, one stepfamily expert, Heather Hetchler, says a biological parent looks at their child through the lens of love first. A step-parent looks at that same child through the lens of responsibility first, and the view can be very different. That's a really powerful statement that we all need to ponder for a while. And often we meet with couples who describe some of their primary pain points a little something like this. The step-parent will be really high-centered on all the things that need to be corrected in the home. They share complaints about how their stepkids aren't held accountable for chores, they eat too much junk food, they fail to do homework, they aren't respectful or appreciative or whatever it is that they're really hyper-focused on. And these observations are all valid. Okay, the step-parent has some concerns about what's going to happen down the road if these things aren't addressed and how these kids might turn out as they head toward adulthood. It's typically coming from a genuinely loving place in a step-parent's heart.
Right. And then the bio-parent will share about all the struggles their kids have gone through and the challenges they've had to face. Maybe there have been some developmental or emotional or even some traumatic issues that their kids have been struggling through. Often their kids are still grieving the loss of a parent or a divorce.
Right.
Maybe the situation in their kid's other home with the other parent is really difficult or even toxic, and the kids are really hurting. The bio parent has a deeper understanding of their kids' hurts and history, and that generates a higher tolerance of their behaviors.
Yeah, they kind of put up with it a little easier than a step-parent might,
Now, all of those unacceptable behaviors their new spouse is concerned about, they may not view those behaviors as real problems because when it comes to their kids, they're focused on other deeper issues.
That's right. And, you know, all of these are very common pain points. But sometimes one or both spouses will inadvertently fall into a codependency trap. And here's a little bit about what that looks like. For the step-parent, they'll become overly focused, maybe even obsessed with the behaviors that they believe need to be fixed in the stepkids. So even normal kid stuff is going to ignite some overreactive emotions for them. Like their stepkids walking through the door and they leave a trail of backpacks and shoes and jackets and maybe even candy wrappers.
Normal
right?
stuff.
Yeah, kind of normal kid stuff. But the step-parent might become really nitpicky or start comparing the poor behavior of their stepkids to what they view as stellar behavior from their own kids. Or if they don't have kids of their own, like I didn't when we got married, they'll kind of use other like friends' kids as some sort of a comparison.
Right.
And often they get high-centered on controlling every little thing their stepkids do or don't do. And they continually voice the observations, the concerns, whatever it is to their spouse, or maybe to friends or other people around them. Or they might end up going straight to what they see as the source of their pain and try to swiftly correct their stepkids and just fix what they believe is wrong. I'll jump into correction rather than staying focused on connection. And when we try to control others with a sense of our own superiority or righteousness, or when we just can't be okay unless those around us are meeting our expectations, we've fallen into a codependency trap. And this was certainly a trap that I also fell into. I didn't just want to fix Kim when she was down in the pit, but I also wanted to fix Annika, my stepdaughter, when I viewed her as behaving as subpar. At times, I was hyper observant, and I struggled to discern what to hold a line on and what to let go of, because sometimes we just have to let go of some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What if you could experience a community that's all about healthy support, guidance, and practical strategies that help you thrive in your blended family? Well, now you can. Blending Together is a supportive community for blended family couples just like you.
Mm-hmm. We've educated and supported hundreds of couples navigating the unique challenges of blending a family. Now we're inviting you to join our community and experience the transformation that awaits you. But you'll need to act fast because we're getting started soon.
Mm-hmm.
Blending Together is not just another community. It's a place where you'll find practical, real-life strategies for building unity as a couple.
And creating more connection as a family.
Experiencing partnership in parenting.
And even dealing with that difficult ex.
Blending Together is a safe, growth-focused space where you get to connect with us and, maybe more importantly, with other blended family couples who truly understand what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
Along the way, you'll discover practical tools, guidance, and hope that empower you to find a future full of confidence and connection.
When you join Blending Together, you'll get to hop into a variety of resources like access to our private Facebook group and online learning platform, monthly coaching meetings, monthly Q&As, and you'll even get to vote on the content for our monthly workshops.
Mm-hmm. Blending a family can often leave couples feeling alone or isolated and stuck, and quality support can sometimes be expensive. That's why we're offering you access to all of this at a super low monthly rate, because every blended family deserves the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their budget.
That's right. So join us in the Blending Together community and unlock the secrets to successful blending. Together, we can create a future filled with hope, connection, and peace. But don't wait. Click the link in the show notes now. The doors will be closing on October 8th, and you don't want to miss out on this unique opportunity to create the future you really want alongside other couples who genuinely get it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we can't wait to meet you there.
And for the bio parent who's fallen into a codependency trap, they'll become more focused on pleasing their kids as opposed to parenting them.
Oh, yeah.
They'll swiftly move in to protect their kids from any discomfort.
Like an angry step-parent.
Yeah. They'll overlook and ignore their kids' poor behavior or defend them and make up excuses when their kids behave irresponsibly or disrespectfully. These parents will avoid conversations with their spouse about their kids' behaviors, or they might become angry or withdraw when their spouse voices their concerns or makes observations.
Yeah.
They'll tend to treat their children with kid gloves, believing they're fragile, and they'll walk around on eggshells or give in to their kids' demands because they don't want to upset their kids in any way.
Yeah.
As a result, their kids hold a lot of power in the home, and this bio parent has very little authority. When we overcompensate, avoid, or take on responsibilities for others who are acting irresponsibly, or strive to keep the peace at all costs, we may have fallen into a codependency trap.
Yeah.
Again, it might appear to be caring, loving, and protective, but it doesn't provide the structure and learning opportunities that kids need developmentally. It disables kids from becoming responsible adults.
And the reality is codependency traps lead to relational dysfunction, pain, and tension. And when we fall into them, we really aren't helping anyone.
No. Back when I was married to my previous spouse and stuck in relational dysfunction with him, somehow, I don't remember, but somehow I got my hands on a book called Codependent No More by Melody Beattie.
Yeah.
And this book completely rocked my world and opened my eyes to the reality that I was enmeshed in at the time, which was codependency.
Yeah.
This book changed my mindset, and eventually it changed my life. Listen to this quote from Melody Beattie. Caring about people, giving our all to people we love, or wanting to control people because we're watching them destroy themselves and hurt us, doesn't mean we're sick. These are natural reactions. Codependency is about normal behaviors taken too far. It's about crossing lines. And when we cross the line into the codependent zone, we've usually got an ulterior motive for what we do. And what we're doing hurts. It doesn't work.
That's like a big dagger to my heart still, because, my well-meaning actions all those years back were really driven by my personal need to eliminate the discomfort I had about your discomfort.
Oh, say that again.
Yeah, it was that ulterior motive. It was driven by my personal need to eliminate the discomfort I had about your discomfort. And in my relationship with Annika, my words and actions were driven by me trying to eliminate my own tension, not fully and genuinely about the process of learning to become good parenting partners with you and raise a responsible adult. So, if you're listening, hopefully you can see how easily this can happen. I love how Melody says it's, normal behaviors taken too far.
Right.
Right. And you can also see how it happens in just about any relationship.
Yeah.
It's the spouse who's trying to fix that depression in their partner. And often they're coming from that place of love and care, like Beattie says. It's the step-parent who's concerned about their stepkid's behavior and wants to see them grow in responsibility and good character. That's coming from a place of love and care. It's the bio-parent who really gets the kid's struggles and has a desire to support them. That's coming from a place of love and care. And that's the insidious and confusing thing about codependency. It starts with a genuine desire to help. It's coming from a good, loving place. But then we end up in dysfunction. And we're kind of looking around like, what the heck is happening?
How did we get here?
Right? And ultimately, we haven't really helped anyone. Except maybe temporarily we've helped ourselves when that other person either complies with our commands or responds to our supposedly loving support. But usually that ulterior motive that Melody Beattie is talking about, it's just, like I said, it's to reduce the discomfort, the pain, or the anxiety that's going on inside ourselves. I can so relate to that.
Yeah. I can too. Pat Springle, who's another expert on this topic, says this. Codependency is a compulsion to control and rescue people by fixing their problems. It occurs when a person's God-given needs for love and security had been locked into a relationship with a dysfunctional person, resulting in a lack of objectivity, a warped sense of responsibility, being controlled, and controlling others.
Yeah, for sure. That's what it boils down to. It's a lack of objectivity. I'll say a skewed sense of responsibility and being controlled and controlling others, right? I think I experienced all of those things when I used to attempt to fix your depression or correct what I thought Annika needed to be corrected.
Yeah. And what was it that got you to that place, honey? Why do you think you crossed the line of love and care into this dysfunction of codependency?
Well, I'm glad you actually asked that, because I'll say, years ago, there's no way I would have been able to articulate this. But as I've learned and I've done my own personal recovery work around codependency, I now know that it was my own emotional discomfort and pain that really got me there. And I wasn't aware of how difficult emotions were impacting the way that I was relating to you.
Okay, so you're saying that your codependency in our relationship was rooted in emotions that you were just kind of reacting to in the moment of pain without really being aware of your pain. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. You'd go into your pit of depression, your pity pit.
Mm-hmm.
When that happened, I often felt abandoned.
So maybe alone?
Yeah, alone, abandoned. I was just kind of left to deal with stuff. And that was a really painful feeling that led me to start thinking that either I did something wrong or that there was something wrong with me inherently. And that created a lot of discomfort. Right. And then to add to that, I felt like the situation was out of my control, which is a painful place for me to be anyway. Right. We'll talk about why that is in a little bit. So I'd lose my objectivity because these painful emotions pretty much took over. I've been abandoned. I've done something wrong. Things are out of my control. And that skewed my sense of responsibility. I thought that I had to take responsibility for all that, and it was my job to fix everything. And I'd do that by attempting to take control any way I could. But in reality, I was actually being controlled by your depression. Your depression was telling me I wasn't okay.
Right.
And that's how we got stuck in our dance of codependency. But in that moment, when I couldn't articulate all of this, it just kind of felt like the loving, caring thing to do as a husband. I mean, when your spouse is down, you want to do something about it, right?
Of course. And that's what makes identifying this so difficult. This can be confusing.
Yeah.
And this kind of thing can happen in any relationship when we experience discomfort, painful emotions, or feel out of control. The step-parent looking at their stepchild through the lens of responsibility first might feel a lot of discomfort when their personal space isn't being respected, right? It's their home too, and things feel out of control when a stepchild leaves a big mess everywhere they go. They might experience strong emotions like abandonment when their spouse disregards a boundary that they've set with the kids or ignores disrespectful behavior. Okay. All kinds of emotions can come up.
Yeah, so clearly we're still talking about me, right?
We are.
Yeah, I certainly felt all those things. This was another area where I sometimes crossed the line into codependency. Early on, I just wanted to fix Annika's behaviors.
Right. You want what you want.
Totally. And I believed that what I saw as your permissive parenting style, which did need to make some changes.
Right.
I just saw that we had to change that like now. Like everything has to get reset now.
Yeah. Instant fix.
Absolutely. And so I became over fixated on implementing more structure in our home immediately, because the lack of structure triggered really strong emotions in me. And that led me to jump in and try to control the situation by fixing you and fixing Annika.
Right.
So I got demanding, I got angry, I got accusational, not about the mountains that we really needed to identify, but I was like fixated on all the little molehills.
Oh, yes, you were.
Man, you're agreeing with all this really quick.
And, those things you just described, you would do those things without understanding the strong emotions that I was experiencing when I looked at my daughter through the lens of love first. I knew she was struggling. It was confusing and hard for her to move between two homes. And I also knew that the dynamics in her dad's home created a lot of challenges for her and a lot of pain. So my heart ached for my daughter, and I felt guilty for all the hard stuff she had to endure. I was also afraid that if I implemented too much structure too quickly and made big changes, that she wouldn't enjoy coming to our house anymore. And in my own difficult emotions, I crossed the codependent line when I lost my objectivity around parenting. I became overprotective because I believed it was my job to keep my daughter from experiencing any further discomfort in life. I developed this skewed sense of responsibility that, hey, I needed to do everything for Annika, which included taking responsibility for things she should have been responsible for. And I do this by overlooking and excusing her poor behavior. I'd pick up her mess and avoid holding her accountable for any actions. I tried to take control of the painful realities of divorce by pleasing my daughter and satisfying her every whim. She pretty much ran the show when she came to my house. But the bottom line was that I was being controlled by my own guilt and fear, and my pain dictated my parenting.
Ooh, that's a really powerful statement.
It's a hard thing to admit, but
Yeah.
and again, at the time, I wouldn't have been able to articulate all this.
Right.
Now I know I also have gone through a process of overcoming and healing from codependency.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, we've thrown a lot
We
at
have.
you today. Some big concepts around a very big topic. And we certainly aren't experts on codependency. But we do see how it creates dysfunction, resentment, confusion, tension, all kinds of negative stuff for blended families. And that's why we wanted to at least attempt to just kind of open up some awareness. And it's our hope that maybe you'll decide to go a little bit deeper on your own, especially if you've been listening today and you're going, oh, shoot, like I can relate to that. Right?
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's a bummer that I can relate to
and
that.
maybe it's not exactly like what we described, but there's some other area where you're kind of falling into that codependency trap.
Yeah.
And if you're listening and wondering if you are stuck in some kind of a codependent dynamic, maybe in your home or maybe with the kids' other home, because it's also easy to cross the line when we try to fix an ex-spouse or control how the other home operates. And of course, that can go the other way too. When we're so worried about avoiding conflict or rocking the boat that we allow our ex-spouse to kind of walk all over us and insert their control onto our home. It can go, like we said, it's easy to fall into these codependency traps with any relationship, especially those that tend to stir up strong emotions in us. So to help you determine if you've fallen into a codependency trap, we've got some possible indicators of codependency, some signs.
Yep, some like warning flags.
Right, to share that are helpful in identifying what kind of circumstances and behaviors lead to codependent dysfunction.
Yeah. For me and for lots of other people, our tendency toward codependency actually started back in our family of origin. Melody Beattie says that all codependent behavior makes sense if traced to their origins. The behaviors associated with codependency, from control to caretaking, are behaviors that saved our lives when we didn't know what else to do. In most situations, codependent behaviors are what anyone might do if he or she has walked in our shoes for any length of time. That's a really powerful statement.
Yeah.
And so the first signs of codependency that we want to be aware of is if we've experienced some family dysfunction or abuse or instability growing up in our family of origin. I often felt these kinds of things in my home. And in my life as a kid, things were out of control. And as an adult, I often feel unsafe when I believe that things are out of my control.
Right.
Now, if you've experienced significant difficulties growing up, does that mean you're just codependent now? No, not necessarily. But it could mean that you're susceptible to codependent behavior, and it might be worth doing some self-examination.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, another sign is low self-worth and feelings of inadequacy, guilt, and shame. And this was something I experienced in my family of origin. I believed I was never good enough. So some people might hold on to a belief that their value, worth, and significance hinges on rescuing or pleasing others.
Yeah, that's right. And, excessive people pleasing, that's another big sign that there could be some codependency tendencies going on. I just made that up, codependency tendencies. I like that. While it's normal to want to please people around us, and of course we serve each other in our marriage and in our families, sometimes we cross the line of codependency when we're unable to say no to others, or when we're unable to express our true opinions about what we notice or what we see. We just kind of go along with whatever everybody else wants.
Right. We abdicate.
Yeah.
And along those same lines, we might have a difficult time being honest and vulnerable with our true feelings, our thoughts, and our perspectives. And so we tend to keep those things bottled up inside. We keep them to ourselves. We might also constantly worry about the opinions of others. What are they thinking? What are their opinions, their desires and preferences? Because theirs trump ours.
Oh, inside. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. Yep.
We might experience anxiety, fear, and the ever-present sense that doom is lurking around the corner, which compels us to take control so that we can somehow prevent an imminent disaster, even ones that never actually happen.
Yeah. And again, these are not diagnostics for codependency. They're simply some warning flags that someone might be susceptible.
Right.
Another area to pay attention to are those who have experienced significant loss and grief. And guess what? By the way, pretty much everyone in a blended family has experienced some loss and grief at some level. Right? Melody notes how similar codependency is to grief, and that most people with codependency issues have lost a lot. She goes on to explain that we may not be aware of how much we've lost if we lost something that we never really had, like a feeling of safety or security, feeling protected or feeling loved. Maybe for some of us, that just never existed. All we know is that we feel incomplete. So we cling to anyone we can, hoping we'll find our missing pieces in them.
Wow, that's really profound.
Yeah.
But for both of us, that statement makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, sure.
Honey, I know that you never really felt safe or protected growing up. And I struggled to feel loved for who I was. I never felt good enough or complete when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And those pain points can easily get triggered and cause us both to move towards codependent behaviors.
Yeah, for sure. Another sign is a lack of healthy boundaries. And that's kind of what we're talking about here, right? Codependency is this extreme leap over the boundaries, going just too far, either in the control or the caretaking. We feel responsible to fix other people's problems, sometimes blame ourselves for their problems. And a healthy boundary doesn't mean we don't have empathy for others. So don't hear us wrong. We're not now building walls and saying, okay, well, forget you, you just do your thing. It was actually okay for me to have empathy for you in those moments where you were feeling depressed. And it was actually also okay for me to offer support.
Right.
But my boundaries pretty much didn't exist when I started to take on your problems as my own problems.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, one of the best things you ever did for me was step back and let me sit in my own problems. And I know it was hard for you to get there, and I know that because of your own discomfort, right? But it was necessary for my personal growth. Because as long as you were taking responsibility for my problem, I didn't have to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You were enabling me to stay stuck. But as soon as you released yourself from that responsibility, I had to step up and learn how to solve my own problem. And you learned to do that in a loving, caring way without crossing the line. You really did.
Yeah. So I didn't just build a wall.
No.
But I did hold a boundary.
You learned how to hold a clear boundary, a loving boundary. And as a result, I did eventually take responsibility for my problem, and I got the professional help I needed to get out of my pit.
That's right, yeah.
And that was a crucial time of growth for me that's actually kept me out of the pit of depression for years now.
Yeah, that's right.
So thanks, honey.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you for learning about codependency and healthy boundaries, putting in the work, right?
Yeah,
This takes
it was
work.
a lot of work, yep.
And learning how to manage your own discomfort so that you could show up well for me without taking on my problems, but you still showed care and empathy.
Yeah, it was hard work, and even now sometimes I get triggered and I have to manage that well. But learning how to do that well, it feels really good. It still feels good to have healthy boundaries in our relationship.
Yes.
I think that we enjoy each other way more because we've learned to have healthy boundaries with each other than we ever did when we were just stuck in that old cycle.
Yep.
Right?
We're learning how to get through the hardship in loving, caring ways.
Yeah.
That's not dysfunctional.
Totally. Yeah. Who would have thought?
I
don't
know. It's so much better.
That's right. Another warning flag of codependency is one that I am particularly good at. Wow, it seems I'm really good at all of these, actually. But the thing that I still probably wrestle with more than anything is a tendency to try to take control. Yeah, I have this feeling sometimes that things have to be done my way because I just believe that my way is the right way. And there's times where I'm unwilling to listen to your perspective. And when we get stuck in this kind of codependent trap of control, we tend to become bossy. We might be nagging everybody around us. We might just lose it when others don't go along with whatever it is that we're trying to do. And I've struggled with this for many years. In fact, I struggled so much that it created a lot of angry outbursts. And then I would like feel out of control, but then I would lose control.
Yeah.
And that was all because I felt like I couldn't control you or I couldn't control Annika.
Right.
And eventually, as I learned how to release my own expectations and start to get curious about your perspectives or about other people's perspectives, finally I was able to manage my anger and my need to control. And it took some work, and it took a lot of counseling, took a lot of prayer, took a lot of investment. But man, I feel so much freer now than I ever did in our early years.
Yeah, it's been wonderful and so helpful for us to be able to get through hard stuff together.
Yep.
And we're stronger because of it.
Totally,
I feel so much more connected to you now that we're on the other side of that. So thanks again, honey, for getting the help you needed, because I believed, honestly, that saved our marriage. And my go-to coping skill around all of this is avoidance. And that's another warning flag of codependency. When things got tense, when there was conflict or disagreement, I'd shut down and refuse to talk about what was happening. There was a lot of denial going on for me. And then, of course, honey, when I shut down and shut you out, you'd feel abandoned and out of control, right?
That's right. And that would lead me to anger, and that caused you to withdraw and shut down even more. And round and round and round and round and round and round we go. And we lived in that painful cycle of dysfunction for years, unfortunately.
We did.
We lost years of our marriage to this.
Yeah, and we almost didn't make it through.
Absolutely. But thankfully, about 10 years ago, we each engaged in our own separate journeys of awareness and growth, really understanding our codependency traps and the emotions that fuel them. And that was just a huge catalyst toward healing and moving toward healthier ways of us relating to each other and responding to our circumstances. Because it wasn't just between us. It was all the things that surround us that put pressure on us and tension and all that every blended family has to suffer.
Lots of triggers out there.
Absolutely, yeah. But this was a process that took intentionality, patience, and an investment of time. It's not something that we can just, offer a few tips on a podcast episode and everyone can avoid codependent behavior now.
No.
Everyone's journey is going to be unique, and there's investment that has to occur along the way.
And, as we're touching down on some of the signs of codependency, maybe you thought to yourself, yeah, I do that, or I struggle with that sometimes. If there's a possibility that you lack objectivity, that you've developed a skewed sense of responsibility, or that you're being controlled or controlling others, if you connect with any of what we've shared today, we've got some encouragement and some resources for you to take a next step towards healing and healthy change. Now, earlier I mentioned author Melody Beattie. She's actually written 4 books on the topic of codependency, and we're going to put a link in the show notes to the resources that she has to offer.
Absolutely.
They're excellent. And Melody says this: recovery from codependency is finding and maintaining balance in all areas of our lives. We need to watch the scales so they do not tip too far to either sides as we measure our responsibilities to ourselves and to others. We need to balance our emotional needs with our physical, mental, and spiritual needs. We need to balance letting go and doing our part. We need to find a balance between solving problems and learning to live with unsolved problems.
I love that.
I do too.
You know, she goes on to say, much of our anguish comes from having to live with grief and unsolved problems, having things not go the way we hoped and expected. We need to find a balance between letting go of our expectations and remembering we are important, valued people who deserve to lead decent lives. Wow. I think most of us living in blended family dynamics can relate to this kind of anguish and frustration and that kind of thing, which is why it can be really easy for all of us to fall into a trap of codependency.
Yeah. And, you know, getting out of a codependency trap really starts with awareness and acceptance. We hope that today's discussion has opened up your awareness just a bit, and maybe you're ready to accept that there's some relational dysfunction going on in your life that seems like it could be codependency, or that codependency might be part of your struggle. And if that's you, we just encourage you to keep taking steps forward. Seek deeper understanding around what codependency is and what it's not.
Right, yeah.
Don't avoid what's happening, but find inner strength and courage to keep learning and growing, even if it's baby steps. And please hear me on this. Be gentle with yourself. You know, having codependent behaviors does not mean that you're defective or that something's wrong with you.
Right.
Please view yourself through the lens of love and self-care. Chances are you've been doing your best to make things better. But if you've fallen into a codependency trap, the good news is you don't have to take on the stigma if codependency has this negative connotation for you.
Yeah.
You don't have to label yourself a codependent in order to stop doing things that don't work.
Right.
Right? You can replace dysfunctional behaviors with functional ones, and you can enjoy stable, healthy relationships. But to get there, we must be aware of our behaviors and come out of denial into acceptance of our current reality.
That's right. And, you know, after awareness and acceptance comes the how. HOW, that's an acronym for honesty, openness, and willingness. The truth is, to change our behavior, we must take assertive action, which means doing things differently.
Right.
But nothing's going to change unless we can get honest, keep an open mind, and become willing to try to do things differently. HOW, honesty, openness, and willingness. That's what will eventually lead to healthy change. To overcome codependency, some may need to explore a wide range of behaviors. Caretaking, control, letting go, gratitude, acceptance, surrender, boundaries, feelings, dropping the victim role, learning how to love ourselves, all that stuff. But it really boils down to this: knowing yourself well. Yeah.
Although we aren't experts on the topic of codependency, we understand the complexities of these dynamics because we've lived through them and we've been able to implement the how in our own marriage. And our Relate Strong coaching program, which has made a huge difference for us, is a practical tool that helps couples identify and manage their difficult feelings.
Right.
And like we said before, underneath codependent behaviors are challenging feelings and emotions that often take over. So we've got to learn to acknowledge and face our feelings without allowing them to dictate our behaviors.
That's right. And we're here to help.
We are.
You know, if you're interested in learning more, just click the link in the show notes and schedule a free coaching call with us. We're happy to support you and just explore some possible next steps in your journey. Codependency really does encompass a lot of behaviors: people-pleasing, peacekeeping, enabling, avoiding, controlling, fixing, caretaking, rescuing. Like, we can keep going. It can get confusing, and it's often a result of just some hard times that lead to anxiety, pain, anguish, and disconnection in our relationships. And so while we're not experts, we sometimes can help people take a next step. You know, we started off today's episode with this statement: relationships don't last because of the good times.
They last because the hard times were handled with love and care. And it's our hope that if you're listening today and you want something better, something different in your relationship, that you decide, enough is enough, and you take some next steps towards something new.
That's right.
So we encourage you to check out Melody Beattie's books and other links in the show notes to episodes and articles that relate to this topic so that you can continue on your journey towards learning how to handle the hard times with love and care.
That's right. Hey, thanks for joining us and letting us share a little bit more of our story today. And again, if this has resonated with you, don't just sit in it. Take action. Do something. Reach out to us or reach out to another professional.
You'll be glad you did.
Yeah. And if you're reaching out for professional support, make sure that they have experience or training in blended family dynamics. That's really important. So again, thanks so much for joining us today. We so appreciate you. And that's going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.